My mom and dad insulted me after I gained weight in college. But after I lost 100 pounds and modeled for a huge brand, they tried to take credit for always believing in me. I let them finish talking before I whispered something that made them pale. I, 25 female, spent years struggling with my relationship with my parents, both mid-50s. It's been complicated, especially after I gained weight in college. They weren't shy about commenting on it. And it really messed with my head. Fast forward a few years, I lost 100 pounds, got into modeling, and worked with some major brands. When I went home to visit, my parents tried to take credit for my success. I was very calm when they were singing their praises, and I just whispered something that made them go pale. The silence afterward was all I needed. But am I wrong for not letting them off the hook? Growing up, I was the odd one out. I wasn't a star athlete like my older brothers, and I wasn't naturally slim like my mom. I always felt like I was just there. Invisible, maybe. My family wasn't cruel by any means, but they weren't exactly warm either. They loved me, sure, but the focus was always on my brothers. The constant attention on them, their sports achievements, their social lives, it felt like I was just a bystander in my own family. I remember being the little girl who had to beg to be seen. I tried to get involved in sports, but it never quite worked out. I was always the last one picked in gym class, always the one sitting on the sidelines during games. It wasn't that I was lazy or unfit, I just didn't have that athletic build that everyone around me seemed to have. So, I settled for being good at other things, reading, drawing, and quiet hobbies. But no one cared about that. Not as much as they cared about how my brothers were always at the top of their class or winning awards. Then, college came, and for the first time, I thought I could finally leave all of that behind. I packed my bags, kissed my parents goodbye, and drove off to a state university a few hours away. It felt like freedom, no more comparing myself to my brothers. No more wondering if I was good enough for anyone. I was determined to make my mark, to be someone new. At first, college was amazing. I met new friends, got involved in clubs, and, yes, ate what I wanted without anyone watching over me. It was the first time I could be free from the constant monitoring. I could eat pizza at 3 a.m. if I wanted, and nobody would judge me. I could skip meals or indulge in junk food without anyone telling me to make better choices. But the problem with all this newfound freedom? It wasn't just about food. It was about the way I turned to it for comfort when things got tough. There was stress about grades, about making new friends, about everything. And so, I ate. I gained weight, more than I had ever imagined. What started as a few pounds quickly turned into a noticeable amount. I didn't think much of it at first, but when Thanksgiving rolled around, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I went home to visit my parents, and the moment I walked through the door, I could see the judgment on their faces. "You've gained weight, Clara," my mom said, her voice soft but unmistakable in its criticism. I froze, unsure how to react. "It's just college stress, Mom. It's not that big of a deal." But she didn't let it go. "Stress is no excuse. You have to take care of yourself, sweetheart. You don't want to let things get out of hand." My dad didn't say much, but I could feel the disapproval radiating from him. His eyes flicked to my stomach, then back to my face, his lips pressed into a thin line. His silence was the worst part. My mom, at least, would talk through it. But my dad? He was a businessman who believed in numbers. And now, I was a number that didn't quite add up. Over the next few days, I could barely eat in peace. My mom made offhand comments about healthy eating, about being mindful of my choices, about how good people take care of themselves. It was like everything I did was under a microscope. I tried to laugh it off, to brush it aside, but deep down, I felt humiliated. They were making me feel like I had failed them. By the time I left to go back to college, I was crushed. It wasn't just about the weight, it was about how they made me feel like I wasn't good enough unless I fit into a specific mold. I started second-guessing myself, questioning my worth. I knew my parents loved me in their own way, but it felt like their love was conditional on how I looked, how successful I was in their eyes. Back at college, I kept thinking about those comments. I told myself it didn't matter what they thought. But in truth, it stung. I didn't want to be the fat girl. I didn't want to disappoint anyone. So, I decided to make a change. I started working out, but it wasn't just about weight loss. It was about reclaiming my sense of control. I was tired of feeling like my life was being dictated by other people's standards. I didn't tell anyone. It was a personal decision, something just for me. The weight didn't come off easily, and there were moments when I wanted to quit, when I wanted to fall back into old habits. But something kept me going. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I had to do this for myself, not for anyone else. Gradually, I saw changes, not just in my body, but in my mind. I felt stronger, more confident. I was more than just my appearance. By the time I graduated, I had lost 100 pounds. I felt incredible, like a completely different person. And that's when the unthinkable happened. I decided to take a leap and pursue something I had always wanted to do, modeling. It was a long shot. I had never considered myself model material, and I never thought anyone would take me seriously. But I figured I had nothing to lose. I contacted a few agencies, sent in my portfolio, and to my shock, I got a call. A major fashion brand wanted me to model for them. The excitement was overwhelming. It was surreal. But then, as I looked at my phone, I remembered my parents. I had to tell them. I didn't want to get my hopes up, but I couldn't contain the joy. I called them immediately, and when they picked up, I told them the news. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, my mom spoke, her voice filled with pride, but there was something else too, something I couldn't quite place. "That's amazing, Clara. We always knew you had it in you," she said. My dad chimed in, his voice filled with false enthusiasm. "Yeah, we always believed you could do it. We never doubted you for a second." I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind them of Thanksgiving when they criticized me, when they made me feel like a failure. But I held my tongue. They were still trying to spin this story, trying to make it seem like they had always believed in me, always supported me. I let them continue, listening to their praise, pretending like I was grateful. But deep down, I knew the truth. They hadn't believed in me, not then, not when I was at my lowest. So, after a few minutes of them trying to take credit for my success, I whispered something that made them go silent. "I remember Thanksgiving when you told me I was fat and that I'd never get anywhere if I didn't lose weight. I remember you looking at me like I wasn't good enough. You don't get to take credit for this, not after everything you said." The line went dead silent. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. I could hear my mom's shallow breathing on the other end, and my dad's silence was almost suffocating. I didn't speak right away. I didn't have to. I let the weight of my words hang in the air, settling between us like a thick fog. Finally, my mom cleared her throat. "Clara, I didn't mean. I didn't think it would hurt you like that." Her voice sounded small, almost apologetic, but it didn't feel sincere. More like she was trying to convince herself she hadn't done anything wrong. I could hear the edge of defensiveness creeping in. But I wasn't done yet. I wasn't looking for an apology anymore. I didn't need them to feel sorry for me. I needed them to understand the truth I had buried for so long. "You've never understood," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You always made me feel like I wasn't enough. That I wasn't good enough unless I fit into this image that you wanted for me. I spent years trying to get your approval, trying to please you, but you never once asked if I was happy with who I was." I paused, feeling the heat of emotion rise within me, but I held myself steady. "I'm not the same person I was back then. I don't need your approval anymore." There was a long pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in my mom's mind, trying to figure out how to respond, trying to craft the right words. But there were no words that could undo the damage they had caused me. There was no apology that could take back the years of judgment and unspoken expectations. After a moment, my dad spoke up, his voice soft but laced with something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Guilt? Clara. I'm sorry if you felt like we didn't support you. That was never our intention. We just wanted you to be healthy. We just didn't want you to struggle like we did when we were younger. He was rambling now, stumbling over his words as if he was trying to patch together the broken pieces of our relationship with flimsy excuses. You think you wanted me to be healthy? I interrupted, not letting him finish. Do you really think that's what it was about? Because if you really cared about my health, you wouldn't have spent years criticizing me and making me feel like I wasn't good enough. If you cared about my health, you would have supported me when I was struggling. But you didn't. You never did. It was almost too much to bear. I wasn't yelling, but the intensity of my words made them feel like punches. They were the words I had kept bottled up for so long, the words that I had been too scared to say out loud because I didn't want to hurt them. But now? Now, I was done pretending. Clara, please, my mom started, but I cut her off again, my voice steady now, each word weighing heavy in the air. No. Don't do this. Don't try to rewrite the past. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest easing just a little. You were the ones who made me feel like I was less than. You were the ones who didn't believe in me. And now that I've made something of myself, you want to act like you've always been there, always believed in me? It's not that simple. There was another heavy silence. My parents didn't speak for a long time. I could feel their eyes on me, even though they weren't physically in front of me. I could feel them trying to reconcile the version of their daughter they had created in their heads with the person I had become. But I wasn't the same scared little girl they used to push around anymore. I wasn't the girl who felt invisible. I was someone who had found her own way, who had fought to get where I was. And it had nothing to do with them. Finally, my mom spoke again, her voice quieter this time, tinged with something that almost sounded like regret. I never meant for you to feel that way, Clara. We wanted what was best for you. We wanted you to be happy. I am happy now, I said softly. The words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I'm happy because I did it on my own. I didn't need you to tell me how to live my life, how to be happy. I figured it out for myself. There was a long pause again, and then my dad spoke, this time with more emotion in his voice. Clara. We're proud of you. We really are. We've always wanted you to have it better than we did. I know, I whispered, my throat tight. But the way you went about it. It wasn't the right way. The conversation didn't end right there, but it changed. The usual defensiveness that my parents wore like armor was gone. There was an underlying shift in the air, something unspoken between us. The walls I had built between us were crumbling, not because they were apologizing, but because they were finally seeing me for who I was, no longer just their daughter to fix, but a person in my own right. Someone with a story of my own journey to tell. I knew it wasn't going to be easy from here. We couldn't just pretend that everything was fine. But it felt like we had crossed a threshold. The conversation had opened a door, and now, it was up to us to decide whether or not to walk through it. That night, after the call ended, I sat in my apartment, looking at my phone. I couldn't help but feel a little lighter. Like something that had weighed me down for years had finally been lifted. I wasn't looking for an apology anymore, not really. I had found my peace in what I had achieved, not in the validation from my parents, but in the fact that I had done it all by myself. As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, I knew that my journey wasn't over. There would still be moments when my parents tried to rewrite history, when they tried to paint themselves as the heroes in my story. But I knew now that I had the strength to stand my ground. I had finally found my voice, and no one could take that away from me. The next few weeks were strange. My parents tried to reach out more often. At first, I'd receive the usual "how's everything going" texts, then more carefully worded ones, like "We're really proud of you, Clara. We hope you're doing well, not just in your career, but in your personal life too." It was as if they were testing the waters, unsure of how to proceed. It wasn't like I didn't want to connect with them again, I just didn't know how to navigate this new dynamic. For the first time in my life, I wasn't desperate for their approval, and I could tell it made them uncomfortable. When I spoke to them on the phone, the conversations felt forced at first, like we were two strangers learning how to talk to each other. They tried their best to be supportive, to show interest in my career, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to rewrite the narrative, making it sound like they'd been there for me all along. But here's the thing about parents: no matter how much they try to change, they don't really change all that easily. And over time, I began to realize something: I didn't owe them an explanation anymore. Things started to get a little more interesting when I was invited to do a small promotional photo shoot for the fashion brand I had signed with. It was for an ad campaign that would go out on billboards in major cities. It wasn't the biggest deal, but it was definitely a step up. The company was growing fast, and they were signing a lot of new models, which made the competition fierce. But I knew that I had worked harder than most of them to get here. One day, I was sitting in my apartment, getting ready for a shoot, when I received a text from my mom. It was one of those long, rambling messages: "Clara, we saw your ad for the fashion company in the magazine today. It's just incredible. We're so happy for you. Honestly, we always knew you had potential, but you really proved it now. We're so proud of you for making it. You know, we've always believed in you, even when things were tough." I blinked at the message, stunned by the audacity of it. There they were again, trying to take credit for something they hadn't been part of. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but this time I wasn't going to let it fester. I wasn't going to keep it to myself like I had all those years. I was done being quiet about the way they had treated me. I wasn't going to let them erase the pain they had caused me, just to make themselves feel better. I took a deep breath and then began typing out my response, slowly, deliberately. "Thanks, Mom. But I want to make one thing clear: when I was struggling in college, when I gained weight and you and Dad kept making hurtful comments, I didn't hear a word about your belief in me. You were too busy telling me to lose weight, to look better, to be healthier. You didn't believe in me back then, so don't pretend you did now. This success is mine. It's the result of my hard work, my determination, and the years I spent ignoring your judgments." I read over the message several times before sending it, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and anxiety. It wasn't about being cruel, but about making sure they understood the truth. They needed to know that I had come into my own despite them, not because of them. Within minutes, I received a reply from my mom. Her words came through in a rush, but they were different from what I expected. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I didn't mean to hurt you. We were just so worried about you. I didn't realize how much my comments had affected you. Please know that we're proud of you, truly." That was it. No more long explanations. No more trying to take credit for something they didn't deserve. She was finally acknowledging the truth, acknowledging that she had made mistakes. For once, it felt like she was seeing me as an adult, not just her daughter. And while it wasn't the apology I'd always dreamed of, it was enough for me to know that I had finally set things straight. But the best part came the next time I saw them in person. A few months had passed since the shoot, and I had returned home for a visit. My parents seemed genuinely different. They were quieter, more thoughtful in their interactions with me. I didn't know if it was guilt or the realization that I had become my own person, but they were trying harder now, even if it wasn't perfect. One afternoon, we went out for lunch, and as we sat around the table, my dad finally spoke up. "You know, Clara, I've been thinking. I've always pushed you to be something you weren't. I'm sorry for that. I think I was trying to make you into something I could understand. But the truth is, you were always your own person, and I respect that. I'm proud of you. You've made something of yourself in ways I didn't think were possible." His words were slow, measured. There was no defensiveness in his tone, no edge. It was a rare moment of vulnerability from him. I took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. I could feel the healing starting, but I also knew that I had done what needed to be done to protect myself. I appreciate that, Dad, I said, smiling at him. And I think I'm finally at a place where I can accept that we all make mistakes. But I've learned to be proud of who I am, flaws and all. And I've learned to stand up for myself, even when it's hard. They nodded, and for the rest of the meal, there was a peace between us, something that hadn't been there before. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't instant. But it was progress. And I was okay with that. As the weeks passed, I found myself more at ease with my parents. The anger that had once clouded my heart was starting to fade, and in its place, there was a quiet acceptance. I didn't need their approval to be happy anymore. I didn't need them to define who I was. But I also wasn't going to let them rewrite the past or take credit for my success. That was mine. And I had earned it. The next time I got a message from my mom, I read it and smiled. It wasn't the apology I had once hoped for, but it was an acknowledgement. And for me, that was enough. Clara, we're proud of you. We love you. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. A year passed, and things between my parents and me continued to improve, albeit slowly. The awkwardness that had once filled every conversation now felt like something we could all laugh at. It was as though we had finally started speaking the same language, learning how to understand each other without all the layers of judgment and expectations. I never forgot the conversation that had changed everything, the one where I finally spoke my truth and stood up for myself. It was a turning point for me, not just in my relationship with my parents, but in my life as a whole. I had spent so many years trying to please them, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. That one moment of clarity had opened the door to something I'd never experienced before, real freedom. I continued with my modeling career, and while it wasn't always glamorous or easy, it was my passion. I had built a career from the ground up, and every campaign, every photo shoot, felt like a small victory in a life I had carved out on my own terms. The 100 pounds I had lost physically were nothing compared to the emotional weight I had shed. I was lighter now, in every sense of the word. My parents, for their part, tried harder. They didn't always get it, and there were still moments when they would slip back into old patterns of concern or judgment. But now, I know how to handle it. I set boundaries, and if they overstepped, I didn't hesitate to remind them of the work I had done, both on myself and in building the life I was living. There was no more room for manipulation or guilt. We had dinner together every now and then. Sometimes we talked about the past, and sometimes we just enjoyed each other's company. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. And for me, that was enough. The last time I visited them, something had shifted. My mom gave me a hug before I left, her arms holding me a little longer than usual. When she pulled back, she looked at me with a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "I'm proud of you, Clara. I know I didn't always show it, but I am. You've taught me so much," she said, her voice steady but filled with a sincerity I hadn't heard before. I smiled and kissed her on the cheek. "I'm proud of myself too, Mom. I think we both learned a lot along the way." As I left their house that afternoon, I felt a calmness settle inside of me. I had done the hard work, not just to lose the weight, but to finally stand up for myself and demand the respect I deserved. My relationship with my parents wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was something I could live with. I had learned that revenge wasn't always about being cruel or vindictive. Sometimes, the sweetest kind of revenge is simply standing tall, refusing to be the person others want you to be, and showing up for yourself in ways you never thought possible. That was the victory I had always been searching for. It wasn't about making them pay or punishing them, it was about taking back my power. And as I walked down the street that day, my phone buzzing with messages about a new campaign I had just been signed for, I realized something: the person who mattered most in all of this was me. I was the one who had fought through the struggles, the self-doubt, the criticism, and the judgment. I had built my life from scratch, and no one, not even my parents, could take that away from me. That was my revenge, to thrive. To live unapologetically, for myself. And in the end, I realized that was all I had ever really needed.